Hey, what's going on? This is Albert Huang, aka FedHex, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the joy of human movement. For those of you who are following me because I make VR content now and again, this won't be directly pointed at you guys, but you might want to stick around anyway because the stuff that I'm going to cover is actually kind of very pertinent to VR, but generally I'm not going to talk about virtual reality. Basically, I'm going to be going back to my roots. I started YouTube. I started making videos on YouTube, primarily getting involved with the dance community. And I made a lot of dance tutorials, and this is mostly for you guys, the people who are waiting for me to make more dance content. And I just sort of wanted to talk off the cuff. And for these videos, when I talk off the cuff, I just sort of ramble on and on. So sometimes I talk quickly and sometimes I speak slowly. But in YouTube, there's this thing down here you can watch me at 2 times the speed or 1.5 speed, and I definitely suggest that everyone do that for everything they watch on the internet. That's just my opinion. But anyway, so I'm not going to cut this thing down because it's going to be I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or so of me just sort of rambling on this topic. And that topic is the joy of human movement, which is obviously a very important part of what it means to be a dancer and why people dance. I guess to start, I should give a little bit of context as to why I wanted to talk about this topic. So to start, I guess I'm 32 years old, right? I'm kind of like an ancient man when it comes to the dance world. And this isn't just for liquid dance or even urban styles of dance. This is all forms of dance across the board. Dance is just a young person's game, right? People sort of peak at the age maybe 25-ish. I mean, you really start ramping up at 15, and then top performers are maybe 25, and then everyone just sort of leaves or something. And again, this is across all forms of dance. If you do ballet or whatever, at a certain age, you just sort of age out and you become a dance critic. There's a joke that is basically you go to Juilliard to become a dance critic if you're learning how to dance there, right? And this is it's sort of across the board. Every form of dance, you graduate and you become a dance critic, or you become a judge, or you become a teacher, or whatever, right? There are just different ways that you explore your craft, but you're not you're not in the spotlight as much anymore. There are a few exceptions, of course. There are a few OGs who can just murder it on the dance floor, or can tear a house down at Lincoln Center or whatever. We're old, right? This fact is kind of terrifying for a lot of dancers, right? And we all have to sort of just deal with it in a variety of different ways. And my way of dealing it was focusing on this point of joy. This question of what is movement and why is it joyful. But I guess again, to stress how grave this problem is. I guess when I was young, I started dancing because I was really just energetic and I needed to move, and then I started getting on the dance floor, and there's this kid in junior high school who taught me how to do the hand wave, and then it just sort of stuck to me like glue. I just sort of find myself doing it everywhere. It was just a good way to get my energy out. It's sort of like spinning pens, pen flipping on your fingers and stuff, or learning how to do weird drumming routines with your fingers. I mean, when you're a teenager, you just have so much energy. I went to school. I went to college, and during college, or just shortly after college, and a little bit during college, I sort of learned a little bit more about how far the rabbit hole went when it came to this liquid dance form. I started going out to events, and I started learning the technique, right? And this technique is really powerful, and it's really useful because it gives you a wider range of expression, right? And all my other videos talk about that technique, or many of them. And this wider range of expression means that now if I just sort of think of an idea and I can just sort of explore that idea with my liquid dancing, this fundamental movement is just muscle memory for me now. And because it is muscle memory, I just sort of need to suggest to my mind's eye, oh, here's this thing that I want you to pay attention to. And then sort of my physical body can sort of fill it in from there, right? So what happens though is that, at least what happened for me, was that you start drilling these techniques, and they're so useful for a variety of reasons. And one of the reasons is because sometimes, I mean, you know, like, if you're hitting this hard, you're going out to dance events, like, you know, week after week or whatever, and you just sort of go through the motions. I mean, there is a routine to it all. And, you know, one day you may find yourself in a club in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. You know, you took a bus to get there, so you were already exhausted from the travel of 5 hours or whatever. And you're tired, and there's like 3 more hours of partying left, right? And you just want to make the most of it. So as you're just exhausted on the dance floor, you just sort of start going through the motions, right? Which sort of makes sense. You may not be feeling the groove at the moment, but you're just like, all right, I'll just sort of do this sort of thing because this is something that I've been practicing, and it just sort of helps me like feel the beat again, like boom, 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 boom. And then eventually, you know, I found that if I just sort of started practicing while I was in the dance floor, sort of practicing my my technique, it would sort of, I would notice, oh, okay, now I'm getting back into the groove, and now I can sort of feel why I'm here again, and I just sort of have a new spurt of energy, right? And this works up to a certain point. I mean, sometimes you have to like really drill for a while, and then I would find my groove. And then there were just like times where I would go out and like for the whole event, I was just sort of like going through the motions, so to speak, right? Very uninspired and very just like, ooh, I don't know what I'm doing here, man. Like, what am I doing with my life? I'm like staying up till 4 a.m. And I got like stuff to do tomorrow, but like, I'm not enjoying this like I used to. And that's what's sort of devastating to dancers, is this idea that like, oof, like there's no, it's terrible. I mean, this sort of experience, it will literally make people go crazy. And I'm not using that like, I'm not saying that like as a hyperbole. I mean, like, I know people who have gone like certifiably, clinically crazy due to in large part, I think, by the fact that like when you're young, you see this sort of path ahead of you of I'm going to be a dancer, and as you feel it, like this just feels true to me, I'm going to do it for the rest of my life, and then you just sort of lose your mojo along the way, and everything that made sense before doesn't make sense anymore. And so now this video is getting more deep than I wanted it to get. But the whole point being that this is often where people just fall out. They just retire. Or they somehow, I mean, they just like reject it completely, or they keep chasing that dream man forever and ever without sort of modifying their tactics to sort of accommodate how their lives have changed over time. And I guess like the thing that I want to point out, and the reason I'm going through all this crazy history, is to sort of illuminate that it is easy to get caught up in all those drills, right? It's easy to say, all right, here's how I like make interesting artwork, is by running these drills and then focusing on the mechanics of those drills, right? You can do that ad infinitum. And this isn't only just for dance. I mean, this is sort of like all creative practices. But like, if you only focus on that mechanic, it is very possible that you will miss out on the life force, I guess, the impulse that brought you here in the first place, right? And you could become an engineer or an architect or like a craftsman, but you lose the artistry, right? And to me, I find that the thing that like always sort of reunites me to the art practice, as opposed to the muscle memory, like crunchy mechanical practice, is this question of like, how is movement joyful? And so I wanted to explore that. Okay, so that's the context. So let's talk about sort of what movement is. Okay, great. So, so movement obviously is when I'm going to speak personally. There's something about me, like there's when I, whatever that means, and we'll talk about that in a minute, when I decide to actuate like mechanics of my body to reach my body around in space. That's movement, right? And we have a variety of reasons for movement. I have a 2-year-old, so I'm watching him sort of accumulate a variety of tactics to use his movement to his advantage, right? One is obviously mechanically just like functional, right? Like he needs to eat and I need to eat. So at one point I learned how to grab an object, put it in front of my face, and to bite down on it, or to use a utensil to do the same sort of thing, right? And so this eating function of movement is that's an important part of it. There's also this idea that we use movement to communicate, right? And this is sort of a more abstract layer, because the mechanics of understanding how to eat things are pretty simple. But like communication, what happens is I'm using my body. And the way communication works is there's me over here, and then there's you over there, right? So you're the YouTube viewer, and there's me over here. Or actually, let's say it's just you and me in a club, right? Standing right in front of each other. Me, and then you, and then my body is like right here, sort of mediating this communication, right? So there is like something that in this sort of like framework of thinking about how communication occurs, there is something about me that is me-ness, right? That's like fundamentally like me. That this set of hand movements or whatever, these gestures and this type of communication is trying to sort of scrape away at some of the essential nature of me and communicate it to you, right? And this sort of starts to get into media theory, like so, for example, if I were to draw a picture, it would be me trying to sort of communicate something about the me-ness onto a picture, and then I would give that to you, and then you'd consume that and then sort of internalize some of those lessons and make inferences about what my intents or thoughts are, right? So this piece of paper acts as a medium, right? And so like me to you as a YouTube viewer, like it's me, and then the medium is perhaps YouTube, right? But you can imagine that there are like a variety of different intermediary steps. Like YouTube is nothing more than just a mediation of me talking to my video camera and saving it to my computer. So there's like me, my body, the camera, my computer, and then I upload it to YouTube, so it's YouTube servers, and then like the stream into your browser, and then like the monitor, and then the your eyes, and then your brain processes all this information, and your ears too, right? So there are all these like intermediary steps, and it like the reason I'm bringing all this up is because different modes of communication are appropriate for different things, but fundamentally when you strip away all this stuff, the one that I find most primal to us as human beings, or perhaps most fundamental, or even the most ancient in our sort of evolutionary history, is that of movement, right? Is that of three-dimensional movement. That is to say that if there's me here and you here, the most direct path from me-ness to you-ness, I mean, like, let's be quite blunt and weird and existential for a moment. I am me and you are you, and we will never reach an agree, like we will never come to a complete understanding, right? Like there's just no way that like you will come to understand the totality of my experience, right? That's just like one of the aspects of, and this is something that artists struggle with and can also drive you literally crazy, is that there is this like weird dissonance of the fact that like no matter how much time we spend communicating to one another, I can't completely envelop who I am and what my experience is and sort of transmit that to you. And there are contrived ways through which I can try to communicate, but I find that the most direct path into someone else's brain is through movement. And so I guess like, if we compare three-dimensional movement to two-dimensional media, so 3D movement is more ancient in the sense that like evidence of two-dimensional media like the existence of two-dimensional media in the context of humanity only exists for about like 30,000 years, I think it is like the first existence, the first cave paintings that we've discovered. And those cave paintings are like, they're paintings of buffalo or whatever, and they're paintings of, I think they're paintings of hunters hunting animals, right? Which means that hunters have hunted animals, which means that human beings know how to engage in three-dimensional contexts, not purely functionally, but also like if I need to teach you how to throw a spear, then I can communicate that to you ahead of time, and like there's this social practice of communication in three-dimensional spaces that must have been prior to two-dimensional media. And even if you imagine language, right? Language is, like, if you think about it, physical, in terms of its physical mechanics, it's crazy thinking about like how quickly I can like gesticulate and articulate with my mouth and make noises with my throat and my diaphragm, and all in coordination to communicate language. I mean, all of those things are obviously like sophisticated physical mechanics, right? And obviously, it requires brains that like can accommodate that. But before then, we just sort of had hands that moved around and communicated, right? I'm not saying like that movement is necessarily as sophisticated. I'm just saying because like I can't communicate like my tax return, for example, via like movement. I can try, but I could. But it is something that like if I want to like really deep down communicate like meaniness to you-ness, I love movement for that. And so okay, so again to sort of juxtapose that against just drilling mechanics, right? Drilling mechanics just means you're just going through the motions, boom, 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 which helps you. Because next time you want to communicate an idea of an object, or I mean, let's say this mechanic is what you're drilling, and next time I want to articulate, there's something that is worth my attention that I want to sort of pass along to this side, then I can do that, right? Or something, I don't know. Basically, these mechanics sort of enable you to, when you have them drilled, give you the muscle memory so that the next time you have something to think about, you just sort of think about it, and then all your sort of muscle memory kicks in. So I guess as a part of my practice, it's been useful for me to say, well, actually, personally, I've always mostly danced for myself anyway. I was never really a super social dancer. I would go out mostly to learn new techniques so that I can like incorporate it into my practice, because I find dance to be like a really meditative experience. And by that I mean like it allows me to sort of explore my psychology and explore my my emotional landscape at any given moment. So like for example, and sometimes I do this out on the dance floor too, but sometimes let's say I'm having a really I just had a really bad day at work. I can come home and I can do, I mean, one thing that you could do is just sort of like do what everyone else does, which is just eat your feelings and like try to ignore it and just play video games, right? And I'm not saying that I don't do that, by the way. Like I definitely am victim to that. But a more empowering way for me to account for my terrible moods would be to observe in myself, okay, like this, I had a pretty crappy day at work, and it was because of that particular instance or that occurrence, that event. So I embody that event. I embody like what my projection, my personal thoughts about that event are, and I sort of put them in my hands. And as I just sort of use that, it allows me to explore how my psychology is tumbling that event in my mind. Basically, my mind, I know my mind is already doing this, even if I'm just like trying to forget about it and play video games and eat my feelings away. But here, I'm doing it more overtly, and I can be slightly more aware of how my psychology is tumbling with this problem, right? And perhaps I have this problem, and maybe as I sort of articulate it, just the act of articulation. And of course, like, you can use any form of artwork, if poetry is your thing, or maybe you like to paint or whatever, like maybe that is a great way to sort of sketch out your thoughts and feelings or whatever. But what happens is when you can articulate it, then you can contain it if it warrants containing, and then you can bring other context into it and sort of see how emotionally you're going to take those interactions and see how things just sort of fit and meld together, or how much they reject one another, right? And by going through this, you're basically systematically approaching your daily issues with other suggestions, and your mind can try to figure out like different combinations of other resources that you have that you've just sort of forgotten about temporarily because you're so focused on how crappy that day was, right, or how crappy that particular event was. And I found that, like, generally that is even that, to be clear, like, what I just described is another mechanic that you can drill. But really the power of all this is the moment when you take a step back and you're like, whoa, this is new. Like, this is discovery. This is joy, right? This is like transcendence even. All these things are, and all of these things are enabled because I have the skill to craft meanness, to manifest that which is sort of inside me, which is fundamentally incomprehensible by like to other people, because no one will ever be able to understand me 100%. But at least I can take this aspect, and I have the power to use my body to articulate it in very fine detail, actually, in a way that, like, I would never be able to articulate so cleanly with words. That's just me, of course. I think some other people have more talent with words. But that's the joy of human movement. And once you can sort of acknowledge that, like, this is a really damn powerful thing, then it makes you respect your ability to sort of navigate space. And when you respect your craft, you assert an entitlement towards like you get to command presence on a stage, right? Like, if you know, for me, like, I know that, like, I possess this raw power with my hands, and not to say I'm the best, but to say that, like, this entitles me to at least articulate and let people observe if they would like to, right? And so this is what I find joyful about dance, is that, whether or not I'm communicating it to others, because sometimes I just work out my issues by myself in my living room, and sometimes I go out to clubs, and actually, honestly, like, the times there were a few times where, like, people where, like, I have, like, totally owned a dance floor. I'm not that much, but there are a few times where it occurs, and, like, when that happens, I'm so in flow state and I forget about it while I'm in it, but only after the fact people acknowledge it and it sort of knocks me out. But what happens is, inside, I'm working through really weird personal issues, like, that would not be appropriate to talk about if it was just me standing around inside a circle of, like, 15 people. It wouldn't be okay for me to be just like, all right, let me tell you about, like, how weird my day at work was today. It was, really, it's like and much weirder personal issues than that. But I take these really weird personal issues, and I imbue so much of my intent and my effort to clarify and like, so many aspects of my struggle with who it is that I am, or what it is that I am working with, that it becomes evident to other people. And actually, for me, most people say, wow, you were, like, really musically on. Like, you had a lot of musicality. That's often something that I get. And it's not that, like, it's funny because I'm not, like, when I'm picking up on musicality, it's not that I'm really listening to the music and then being like, okay, the next beat is going to come down, and then boom, like, then I do have to do this power move or whatever, right? What usually is occurring is I'm just sort of subconsciously absorbing the music, and I'm so obsessed with, like, the work, the craft of sort of spewing my emotions out into this like very articulated form, such that when my subconscious clicks into or hooks into the obvious musical cues that are occurring, and all of our subconsciouses will do that. I mean, we're just sort of naturally inclined to understand patterns of this type of music, especially club music. It's very obvious and repetitious, right? When our brains do that, then our brains find new opportunities to like blow up and find different sort of nodules to sort of like embed our psychologies into it and let other people sort of peer into who it is we are fundamentally, right? I should stop using the we so freely because I'm speaking personally, but I do really believe that I'm not alone in this. I would love to hear actually responses from other people who have different ways of handling the problem of aging out in the dance world. And I would also love to hear from different people with regards to what they find joyful about movement. What I find joyful about it is a mode of it is a mechanic through which I can communicate. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are other obviously there are other reasons other people dance. And some of them are probably very closely related to what I have to say, and some of them are probably very, very different. So yes, that is sort of all I wanted to just sort of get off my chest. I just wanted to let that out there. I am sort of interested in making more videos for dancers, and I also am very interested in trying to come to terms with what I believe is a huge opportunity for two conventionally very different different subcultures to sort of like link together, which is the dance world and the virtual reality world, because I think there is a lot of ways that each subculture can sort of assist the other one. Anyway, so that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on what brings you joy in dance, especially YouTube like response videos. I'm really into those. What do you find joyful about dance? What do you find joyful about movement? On the one hand, and then on the other hand, like as you either are aging out or as you can see the impending age out, in the next like few years of your life, or just the decline of your physical prowess, how you are accounting for that in a healthy way, because again, it is a scary-ish thing to just sort of ignore and hope that it plays out by itself, because sometimes it just don't. It's just the way it works. Cool. So again, thank you for watching. Peace.